For those who remember, for those who will never forget, and for those who will experience the Star Trek adventure for the very first time. The Star Trek Hexology. Six timeless adventures that have changed Star Trek forever. Now, all 6 films remastered in glorious HD for the ultimate in sound and picture quality. This will be your last chance to own a physical copy of Star Trek. The Gene Roddenberry creation that launched the Star Trek franchise. The human adventure has just begun. For all generations. The original Star Trek films on sale one last time. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Chillporeal, and well, with me, I got a very special guest, an expert of the original Star Trek. I've wanted to have a conversation with him for the longest time. We got Subcommander Tal, named after the same character from the Enterprise incident. Sir, thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to have this conversation.
Oh, no, thank you very much. I was just really enjoying that intro you put together there. And yeah, no, I'm super happy to be here. I'm sorry for the delay and the little audio issues to begin with. Hopefully we'll get by that. But yeah, no, I'm happy to be here and talk about the same things I've talked about 10 million times in my life, but I can't seem to help stop talking about them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So that intro, that's my main Chillporeal intro. So like I showed the episode, I showed like the Where No Man's Gone Before, then the Corbomite, then I showed it in production order until you get to Charlie X, and then it zooms in, and then it becomes, you know, whoever the guest is and all that, and whatever their wheelhouse is. So that's always been in there since the very beginning. Then I added, like, you know, all the other Star Trek stuff, and it always ends with a joke, a visual joke, and then Picard does the face palm. And all that.
Okay.
That's and then the rest of it's just, you know, stuff that I like and stuff that's, you know, in my wheelhouse. So I figured you'd appreciate that one. And that trailer I made was based off of a VHS trailer for Star Wars. Believe it or not, there was a Star Wars trailer, VHS trailer. Every time you put on the 95 reissue of Star Wars, that had you know, the blue logoed Star Wars, the purple logoed Empire, and I think the magenta
Jedi
logo Return of the Jedi that had Yoda. So Darth Vader was on the cover of Star Wars, the Stormtrooper and the AT-ATs, and then of course Yoda was on Return of the Jedi. It was those that had that trailer, and I wanted to make a Star Trek, the 6 movie Star Trek trailer like that. That's where you get the one last time, because believe it or not, the last version of Star Wars, that tape, those VHSs were the last version of the original Star Wars, the theatrical Star Wars. So I did something
it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, and that what a great inspiration. But you know, I have downstairs, 2 flights from where I'm sitting now, in my CD and DVD cabinet, 3 DVDs of the Star Wars film, the first 3 films, and on one side it's all the updated remastered whatever effects that he did in the late 90s, and the other side is the original So the original effects, it's not letterbox, it's like a
Yeah.
TV version. I don't know when that was from, but it's like I'm never giving that up because
No.
and it's fine. People want to remaster, whatever, that's fine. But I like the old ones. I like the original ones, and it just,
Han shot first. Han shot
Han shot
first,
first. Yeah,
and that's all. That's all there is to it.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I'll be honest, and I've said this to other people, but Star Wars was my gateway into. Before I even get into that, I want to say hello. I have to say hello to the chat. Who's all the lovely people who are here. I actually remembered to make a poll. So definitely click on the poll.
Yeah.
Whatever your favorite episode was, or put in the chat what it was. So Jill right here, welcome Jill. First time seeing you here. She put down Devil in the Dark. Devil in the Dark's a great episode. It's also Mr. Shatner's. It's also Mr. Shatner's favorite episode. Indeed. I forget why that is. I know his father died during the filming of that episode. And he had to leave.
I doubt Shatner could actually tell you a summary of that episode. But what's important about it is just what you said, that it coincided with a personal loss for him, and not just the loss, but also the feeling. And he said this story many times of being supported by his castmates when he got the news, because he wasn't able to fly. I think it was to Miami to go pick up his dad's body until the evening. So he decided to just try to still work through the afternoon, and even hearing the information, getting the bad news in the morning. And he has said on a number of occasions, very touchingly, which is rare for Shatner. He's normally, he wants a laugh. He's kind of snarky, but very movingly, he's talked about Nimoy just standing close to him, and also Jerry Finnerman, who had lost his father, cinematographer before. And he used the analogy, I think, comparing them to like elephants, which sounds weird, but apparently elephants, when one of them needs supporters or upset, the other elephants kind of close ranks and just give them the support. So that's what he remembers about that episode, which is why it's his favorite. But whether he remembers things about Hordas and Pergium, I seriously doubt it.
No, I think he is. I think he has gone on record multiple times saying he's never watched. He doesn't like to watch. I think a lot of actors don't like to watch themselves act. I think he has said that himself multiple times. So I don't, honestly, I think I'm with you on that. I don't think he's seen the episode, but
yeah,
it's basically, he remembers the work. He remembers the work. He remembers, how his coworkers were to him and all that. And I think that's good enough. So yeah. Devil in the Dark is just, it's a solid episode.
It's a classic. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's not I wouldn't consider it the first really humanitarian episode. I think that would go to Arena, or maybe even something earlier. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But Devil in the Dark really helped establish what Star Trek truly is, especially going down the line. But before we go any further, gotta say hello to Dwayne Muff, who says his favorite episode is the Doomsday Machine.
Hi, Dwayne. Yeah, well, that's another. Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead. I had that episode. I watched it, but not anymore. Sorry, I had to do Matt Decker impression.
Irresistible.
But that was terrible. Actually, initially, that scene where we meet him, he's like a zombie. He's in shock, and I couldn't tell if he was trying to cry or if he was trying to scream. He was like, he had his mouth wide open. I was like, what was up with that?
It's great theatrical acting that, was nearing the tail end of that style of acting. Once you get into the 70s, it becomes more naturalistic, but it's like theater. And I love how emotional it is. And that episode in particular, I mean, I've seen it 9 million times, but every time you get to that countdown at the very end, is Kirk going to beam off on time? I mean, it's just, the pacing is perfect. You can't, there's nothing you could add or take away to that.
Especially when the transport pads are blowing up, they're sparking, and Sky's like, damn, he has to go back up to Jeffrey's to fix it. Like,
Scott. Yeah. Mr. Scott. Yes.
Mr. Scott. But when I think of William Wyndham now, I actually don't think of Matt Decker. I think of the scene where he doesn't say a word. He's just like this. In Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. When he's looking at
that's right. At the beginning, he's the ad executive.
Yeah, he's the ad executive. He's just looking.
They're waiting for him to say something, but then they delay it. Yeah.
So he doesn't say a word, but he's the reason why Steve Martin is late for. He barely gets home in time. Yeah, I love. Yeah, same here. But okay. and we got Starfleet Sohail, another person who I've seen for the
a
first
legend. Hi,
time.
Sohail.
Welcome there, welcome.
He's
LLAP.
very, very kindly allowed me on a few of his many, many, many streams as well. So, and a good friend.
All right. Well, thank you for being here so much. And then we got David Glenn. How you doing, David? Thanks for being here. And then we got another great Star Trek fan, Mike Pacific 414. Thank you for being here. And who else we got? We got my friend Salty Traveling C. I did what I call a Trekporial with him. We talked about the implications of A Taste of Armageddon. That is an episode that needs to be discussed quite a bit. That's such a good one, and it's so terrifying when you think of the implications of that one.
Absolutely.
And we got it's Courtney's Fellowship of Oddballs. Hello, all. Well, how are you? It's good to see you. So they call me Nerd Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. So. And I think, and we got Jacob Ironside, another great YouTuber. He's been doing great with doing movie discussions and everything. So thank you for being here, Jacob.
Nice to meet you.
And I'm trying to see who else is here. Well, first time here, Kim Wachowiak. Wakowiak. I should know, I'm Polish. Wakowiak.
Okay.
Wakowiak. There you go.
Hi,
Spock's mind. Well, Spock's brain. You know, I'll talk about Spock's brain. I have a secret place in my heart for Spock's brain. Plus, I was a kid, and the fact that Spock's name was on there kind of stood out to me because I had I bought my first ever owned Star Trek VHS. I owned myself. That my parents bought me for my 12th birthday was Star Trek 4 because I did not see that movie. It was not at the video rental store. So I saw 2, 3, 5, and 6, and I saw the movies before I watched the original series, but 4 was not there. So I skipped from 3 to 5.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So my parents bought me 4, and there was like a little
Did it have the TNG preview on the beginning of that tape? I know the when it first came out, they had like a sneak peek of the next generation. Which
you know which one I'm talking about? That's the red and black ones, and if you put all the tapes together,
you get those. Yeah, that was after.
Okay. Yeah, those are the ones that so I got number 4, and it had a little ticket in there, and the ticket had a list of all the original series episodes. All like a list in production order, and I was like, okay, Dad, I want this episode and I want that episode. So my dad was like, oh yeah, I've known this one. Because my dad grew up in the 60s, so he watched Star Trek as a kid. He was always trying to tell me, he's like, hey, I remember this episode, I don't know the name, but there's one where Kirk is fighting Spock. And so for the longest time, we were trying to figure out which episode that was. And then we finally got to Amok Time. Yeah. And then the rest the rest was history.
But you picked Spock's brain because that's Spock's name in it, and it's like that's got to be
good. And the other one I knew because of I think because I saw the tape before, because they used to have a Star Trek section at the Suncoast Video at the mall right by my house. So there was science fiction. So they had Doctor Who and all the classic movies, but then it had its own Star Trek shelf, which had all the original series, the movies. It had some of TNG. I think they were starting to release seasons 1 and 2 of Deep Space Nine. This is like 96, 97. Okay. So the blue Star Trek, so the blue tapes, the ones with the Star Trek logo with the it's white, but it has it has like a red borders and all that, like a glowy red border. Those were the ones that I got. So it had it had the air date in the back. It had the star date. Now I can tell you backwards and forwards production order of the original series because I had that little ticket. That list and all that. And I've done it on stream where I've recited, and everyone calls me
I'm not sure
nerd.
I
Everyone called me a nerd, and I never let it down. But the star dates, I'm not that nerdy. I don't know the star dates.
Yeah. Well, I don't even they're a lot more random. So yeah.
Is that what I always wonder if there was like there was a method to the star date or something? So it's just random numbers like 600.
In general they increase as the series go on. Not totally linearly, but the later season has greater numbers than the first season. But I don't know. Scott Mance has a great pet theory about I think the first digit referring to the year, and then, but people have tried to come up with kind of post hoc solutions to how the star dates work. But no, I don't think they ever had any actual plan in mind. I think it was it was very clearly a device. I think even actually, I think Bob Justman came up with it, a device to, because science fiction was so serious, science fiction was so new to television audiences back then. They really wanted to make sure people could relate to this show, and like it wouldn't seem too far out. So having like a journal where like the captain is describing events that have already happened to sort of set it up,
Yeah.
made it seem like more they thought it would make it seem more accessible, and that's why they started it. But I don't think they ever paid too much attention to the numbers.
Yeah, the star date gives it that it just gives it that futuristic thing.
Yeah,
Instead of using dates, instead of using typical dates, let's go with star dates. Let's be cool about it. At least that's
yeah.
that's how I always thought of it. But
Well,
what's
and
funny
it's
is
also, sorry, I was just going to say it's also good because it kept things deliberately obscure. I mean, the original series, we all know it's in the 23rd century, right? Well, it's very cagey in the original series. I mean, you do get hints, but they didn't want, I remember in the original proposal, at least, or writer's guide, one of those things. This it could be 1999 or it could be 29.99. They didn't want to. They wanted to keep their options open, I think. So having star dates rather than saying it's the year 2100 just made it seem it's in the future. We don't really know exactly when, but that's all you need to know.
I forget. Did they? Now I remember in Spacey they said they said Khan was for launch from Earth in the Botany Bay in 1996 or something like that in the DY 100 future year. When I hear future years in the 90s, I just it just cracks me up every time, because what's funny was
Yeah.
the year I got into Star Trek was 1996. So there you go.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but
That's
but
the
yeah,
year
they
I got
said
out of it.
two
But yeah.
2 cents. So they said 2 centuries. So I
Yeah.
don't remember if it was that episode that told us that they were in the 23rd century, because I think where I first heard it was from Wrath of Khan, because in the beginning of Wrath of Khan you see the famous in the 23rd century ... and then we get the Kobayashi Maru.
Well, even in the Wrath of Khan, it's not consistent because it starts with in the 23rd century, but Khan in that movie says, "On Earth 200 years ago, I was a prince with power over millions." 200 years ago, that's that's the 21st century. But he should be in the 20th. Now,
Yeah.
whether were they just rounding up? I don't know. But in the episode, they said 200 years. You look at Squire of Gothos, where he knows about Napoleon, and he's been observing Earth basically through a telescope without accounting for how long it's taking light to travel. And they, in that episode, refer to the Napoleonic era as being 900 years in the past. So,
Yeah.
pick your episode. But certainly by the movies, it was clear that they basically just said all the dates are 300 years in the future. So the original series was in the 2266 to 2269, and then just go from there.
Yeah. So before I had this bad boy, I had the Star Trek chronology.
Yes, I have that one. Yeah.
So the same issue I had with the Star Trek chronology I had with this book fell apart. Like the pages started falling out for no reason. So I'm guessing poor quality binding or something like that. But I would nerd out over that. I would like all the original series stuff was what I was attracted to as a kid, because I'll be honest, like original series was like nothing. I mean, the only other thing that I saw when I was a kid that came from the 60s was Batman. And Batman was on all the time. I actually saw the old Batman, Adam West Batman before right before 89 came out. I was
Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I remember my dad brought the VHS home, with the Batman logo and all that. And I saw that. I was like, how is it? This is so different. Why is Batman so dark compared to how brightly colored he was? The gray and the blue, as opposed to slick
black and violence. And well, I mean, that's a great movie, and it was huge in its day, 1989. I remember that summer like it was yesterday. Star Trek 5 came out that summer as well. But go ahead. No, finish your thought. Sorry.
So original series. So I remember like catching some original series, but my first ever, like, even as a little kid, I knew what Star Trek was because the Next Generation was always on. So to me, that was Star Trek. You know, Captain Picard, weird, scary looking alien dude whose forehead looks like a Milky Way bar. Of course, that turned out to be Worf. And then there was I remember there was an episode full of Klingons, and that terrified me because it was like you had the very red lighting and all that, and they were just
pain sticks or something.
The pain sticks, they looked terrifying. And I was a real little kid. I was born in '84, so I was like I just turned 3 when season 1 of TNG started. So, but it was on all the time, you know, when I was 4, 5, 6, and all that. So, so that was Star Trek, and I did watch it because I like it. It's like Mighty Mouse. It's in outer space because there was a lot. I used to rent Mighty Mouse VHS cartoons from the video store. I think that was my first forte into science fiction or space was Mighty Mouse. There was a Mighty Mouse space movie.
Okay.
I forget what that. I think it came on the like early '80s. I forget what that movie was called, but I was like, okay, this is in space, and I'm like, oh, this is boring. So I would always change the channel. I was a little kid. What did I know? And then Star Trek 5 was always on HBO, and my dad used to watch it, and I actually watched it with him. He's like, this is Star Trek. I'm like, what? What do you mean this is Star Trek? That's not bald dude and Milky Way and pale dude with the yellow eyes. Who's this guy with the pointed ears? I kind of like him. I kind of like him, and I kind of like the grouchy dude. I like the grouchy dude. I like the dude that they call Captain. All that. It looked like a fun movie, and you know, because I was a kid, I played a lot of Nintendo games. Legend of Zelda is the big, you know, it was one of the biggest, one of the bigger Nintendo franchises besides Mario. And Link, the main character, had pointed ears. So I kind of saw a little bit of Link in Mr. Spock. And that's kind of what drew me to him. And the movie was fun. And you know what? To this day, despite all the criticisms, the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy dynamic, when they're roasting marshmallows and singing "Row, row, row your boat" is to me is fantastic and funny and all that. I know a lot of people are going to disagree, and you know what? I understand. Like they didn't have ILM to do the visuals, so like especially when they escaped the Klingon Claws. I think his name's Claws. Commander Claw.
Commander Claw, KLA.
They escaped his torpedo. It looked awful. It looked terrible.
It looked not great. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So, you know, Star Trek 5. We had a little discussion about that on Twitter yesterday, I think, or just some people talking about the humor in that, and you know, it's not a fan favorite in general, but everyone knows there's like moments that are really good. I mean, it's kind of a crazy making movie because there's parts of it that are just like the highs are really high and the lows are really low. But you know, it's very sweet to think of you as a child that age, and like, you know, when you're young, you're just open. You had no idea. You hadn't like established, well, this is real Trek or that's not real Trek, or this is what I like. And this is, you know, you're just absorbing it all and liking what you like. And that's great. I mean, my experience with Star Trek 5 was quite different when it came out, but I can tell you about it if you want, or move on. But
I'd love to, since I've so I want to say what really kind of I want to hear how you got into Star Trek. But I'll tell you what kind of solidified me into watching the movies and then getting into the show. So 96, I'm at it wasn't the Suncoast, but it was at an FYE where they sell CDs, but they also sell VHSs as well. Well, I was, I had the original Star Wars trilogy, watched it all. I was like, okay, I'm kind of interested in other space stuff because of Star Wars. I was, becoming an adolescent. I was 11 I was 11. And I'm looking at the tapes, and I remembered seeing Star Trek 5. Remember, I told you, watching on HBO with my dad. I was real young, but I was a little bit older, and I kind of wanted to, I was getting older to the point where I wanted to recapture the stuff that I watched as a kid. And plus I like Star Wars. So I kind of was getting interested in Star Trek. I looked at the tapes and I started reading the backs of the boxes. And the one that really stood out to me, so I looked at motion picture, looked at the Wrath of Khan, looked typical, but then I looked at the Search for Spock. And the Search for Spock gave me chills because it spoiled what happens at the end of the Wrath of Khan, but it was the first time I've ever seen the idea of a main character getting killed or dying in a movie. and that kind of that it might this might sound a little morose, but it interested me into checking it out. And I looked at the rest of them and I was like, I kind of want to rent these. So I rented the Wrath of Khan. I was a kid. I didn't fully appreciate it. Like, I watch Wrath of Khan now, I cry every time because I've been through, life experience. I've lost, I lost my father. And so, like, I love that movie regardless. It never gets old. But when I was a kid, I didn't quite appreciate it.
Sure.
But it was still a great movie. But it was Star Trek 3 that got me really liking it. Seeing the crew's loyalty, seeing them going back for Spock and risking everything for him, that it takes a great degree of selflessness, and that really moved me as a kid, because I didn't really, at that point, I didn't have friends. It was good to see adults being friends to each other, because it gave me hope that I could make friends in the future, and I have, and it's been wonderful. But it's what really sparked it got me into Star Trek, and then I watched the rest of the movies. I think at that point, First Contact just came out, and you said
you still hadn't at this point seen like all of the old series. Yeah, you hadn't,
or TNG. So I saw the movies first. So I actually watched the movies first.
Yeah,
and then I was like, okay, there's no more Star Trek movies to watch. What do I do next? Well, start watching the show. And so I started watching so I started getting the original series. I got
the historical documents.
Yep. Yeah. So I got those first 2 tapes. I got was Space Seed and Spock's Brain. Christmas of 1996. And I got that with I think I got that with the Donkey Kong Country, one of the Donkey Kong Country games on Super Nintendo. And that was my Christmas break. So I always, it's weird. I managed to, as a millennial, I managed to put those 3 things together. So when I look at one or I look at the other, it makes me think of the other one. It's for sure. Funny how that works, but
absolutely.
So that's how it was. So, and then ever since then, I've been, try to collect as many tapes as I could. Arena, I loved, but we'll get into that. I want to hear how you got into Star Trek, your history.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, it's in a couple different phases, and but I'm one of those rare people who was born in the middle of the 70s. Like between, you can look on a graph, like 73 to 77. There was not a lot of babies being born. So everyone I talk to about Star Trek, there's people older than me and people younger than me. There's not that many people, but all that is to say, I was never unaware of Star Trek that I can really remember. My dad used to watch it, and I would watch it, with him, when I was like 4 or 5, like reruns. And, I remembered this show and parts of it. I remember him watching, I always tell this story, The Empath, which, if you recall that episode, the Vians, the wounding of McCoy, this very intense music, the woman who doesn't talk. It's an intense episode. And I remember like being 4 or 5 and watching that, and, just your eyes are, what is going on with this, this television program? So I always knew about it, but I wouldn't call, at that age, I wouldn't have said I was a fan. I mean, I was more into Star Wars, or frankly, like He-Man, or probably something like that. Or whatever else was around back then. But, later on, kind of in middle school, Star Trek, well, it was always on the television. I mean, there was always reruns. I mean, this is in 70s, 80s. There weren't,
I heard it wasn't content. I heard it was on every night in the 70s.
Yeah, sometimes twice a night. We had Channel 45 in Baltimore would play, and then some of the DC channels would play, and we could I live in between those 2 cities and could get reception of both. So I started randomly watching it. Reruns in the 70s. Started randomly watching it, I guess when I was in middle school, and just getting more and more sucked into it. Now, I had seen Star Trek 2 in the theater with my dad. I was still pretty young. I was about 7 then. And I liked it, but it was like, is this the same thing? I mean, Scotty's this old guy with a mustache. Like, is this even the same show? I still wasn't a fan then. But once I was about like 12, 13, I think I was just so drawn to the character dynamic. This, Captain Kirk being, adventurous but sensitive, all this charisma, and Spock having this, angst, which is really relatable in your teenage years. This guy who feels stuff but has to keep it suppressed. And just, his whole demeanor, and, McCoy being the humanitarian. I love spaceships. I mean, all little boys love spaceships, but, I think it was really entering adolescence that the character relationship really drew me into this. So I just was watching the reruns all the time. And by the time I was like 12 or 13, I started going to conventions. I mean, there used to be a lot more of them, and they were humble, they were just
Yeah.
grassroots things. And, started meeting some of the cast at conventions, which was, so, amazing to me at that age. And I don't have a strong memory of seeing Star Trek 3 in the theater, but I must have done. But I do remember seeing Star Trek 4.
Oh, how was that? That must have.
Oh,
Did that get everybody laughing? That must have been.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it was wonderful, and still very open, very open. So by I guess the late '80s, I'd watched the show a lot. I'd started buying the books. I bought the Alan Asherman Compendium, or the Making of Star Trek, or David Gerrold's World of Star Trek. Reading about the show. I'd gone to conventions, getting autographs.
I wonder if those are still available. I'm interested now, especially.
Some of them are hard to get. I mean, I remember looking, because the Asherman Compendium came out in a couple editions. The one I have stopped.
Is that the one with
1986.
Is that the one with the sketches? The sketches of the sets and all that. I remember I got a book.
Oh,
they had I think it was all of Matt. I don't think it was Matt Jeffries.
Matt Jeffries.
His sketches. So he sketched Dr.
Like
Crater's
corridor.
temple.
Yeah.
The corridor. He sketched all the elaborate sets that were exclusive to particular episodes. So
yeah, that was probably Making of Star Trek. I think they had a number of his sketches in that. But yeah, I was, by the time I got to high school, and this was in like 1988, I was kind of known as the Star Trek guy at the school pretty much.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm the Star Trek guy here. Like, people come to me for especially original stuff. So, well,
yeah.
I feel like now I'm going to you for. I have some questions myself. So
yeah, well, I spent a lot of time watching TV. Or back then, also it used to be like on Labor Day or something, they would do Star Trek marathons, and we lived in a townhouse, my mother, my sister, and I would go down to the basement and get the TV, bring it up into my room, get the VCR, bring it up into my room, and VHS tapes in recording the marathons that they would play, marathons of Star Trek. So I was very into it in that age. And, Star Trek 5 came out, and, it was not a success. Not to linger too much on Star Trek 5. There was parts of it, again, I really liked. Parts of it that I felt a little cringy. But my fandom continued, and by the end of high school, almost, Star Trek 6 was coming out, and that was a wonderful experience to be there in the theater, and dedicated to Gene Roddenberry, and hearing everybody applaud. And remember, it was Christmas of that year of 1991. And it was there was a 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
There was an event at the Smithsonian, the National Air and Space Museum, which I live close to, where they invited all the cast to come. There was an exhibition, a Star Trek exhibition that ran there for about a year. I volunteered there as a teenager in high school and saw the cast there. So I was all in on this show, and that continued into college for a couple of years. But then, and I hadn't, I mean, we can talk about TNG in a moment, but but around like 1993, 1994 there, but it's a little bit after Generations. I think I like it was like a balloon popping. Like, I need to be done with this. I've been into Star Trek since, for like 10 years now, practically. And I'm just, I became interested in other things. I mean, I didn't avoid Star Trek, but I wasn't watching it so much anymore. And really, that's how it was for a long time. I mean, I still remembered everything, because, when you're a kid, you remember everything that,
yeah,
I remember my phone number, but, from when I was 5, but God knows what my wife's phone number is today. I don't know. You'd pick it up. But when the pandemic hit, or really before that, when I started discovering some Star Trek podcasts, like Inglorious Trexperts, this was in 2018, somewhere around there. I started Well, yeah, I remember I used to really like this show. Let me kind of get back into this. And then the pandemic hit and we all had
Yeah.
time. And I found, that was when I got on Twitter and started finding these, live tweeting events where you could actually, it was new because you could share this experience. You could just watch, everybody agrees to watch the episode at the same time and you send little dopey comments back and forth. And that was, just reignited my interest. And, now I'm totally geeking out on this show again, although I don't really watch it much, but I like to talk about it and just write about it. So yeah, that's
Same,
it.
same here. I mean, I've been, I have a lot of different interests myself. Especially the latest iterations of what they call Star Trek now. I haven't really liked as much as the earlier stuff, because the earlier stuff had closer to that formula, closer to that spirit, that what made the original series, that drew a lot of people to the original series in the first place. So, I mean, I know a lot of people will disagree with this. I don't want to, alienate anybody. But yeah, so it was the kind of the same thing with me. I still love to talk about it. I still love to, whenever someone has has said on like X or something, like especially someone that I follow says, "Oh, I watched Star Trek for the first time." I always reach out to them and say, "Hey, you want to hang out and talk about it? Because I could talk about this all the time." So, but it was the same for me. So, pandemic hit. I started watching a lot of YouTube. I had a different experience. So I was alone in my fandom for Star Trek for a long time. So I got my friends. So I made some really good friends when I was a senior in high school that were actually interested in what I was checking out. So I showed them um, the movies, some of the Star Trek movies, and I showed one particular friend the original series, and he eventually watched the entire original series. And then the friends that I made along the way, I got them. I actually was the one that got my friends into Star Trek.
Okay.
So, but I wanted to reach out by the time, like around 2018. I never really got into YouTube. YouTube was always full of, content creators like Mr. Beast and all these cringy, very childish, toilet humor type of, content out there. So it never really interested me, but I know a lot of kids that grew up, a lot of Gen Zers grew up with that stuff. So I'm older, so I was already in college when YouTube came out. So it was just like I don't like this. Is stupid. But then I found channels that actually talked about Star Trek, especially older people that probably that knew more than I did. And I was just like, you know what? I've never been to conventions. I really want to start to connect and reach out and connect with other Star Trek fans, which I've not done for the longest time. And so, and then we had the J.J. Abrams movies came out.
Right.
A lot of younger people thought that that's what Star Trek was. I'm like, nope, that's not what Star Trek was. I mean, yes, there was action, and yes, there was some what do you call it, homages and all that, but it wasn't what Star Trek was. I mean, it was more like Star Wars than if anything. But so I want to make a channel and just talk Star Trek initially, but my channel kind of evolved over time. So the first couple videos I made, the first 3 videos, I made an introductory video, but I made an original series recommendation video saying this is a great show. It's my second video, so it's very rusty. And then I made that trailer that we
Right. Yep.
that was my 3rd video.
Okay.
And then I made a 4th video on how to properly watch the movies and all that. How the order that I recommended. I always recommend to, normies who've never seen Star Trek before to watch the Wrath of Khan first, and then watch up to Undiscovered Country, and then go back if they like they go back and watch motion picture, and because motion picture is very highbrow compared to the rest of them, and it's a little bit more 2001 Space Odyssey and all that. So it might I remember when I first saw it as a kid, that movie put me to sleep, even though there were terrifying moments. One thing I liked about the first 2 Star Trek movies, there were horror elements. Even in the motion picture, there were horror elements. That was something about the 70s and 80s that they had that. There was like you had the SETI eel going into the air. That was terrifying.
That tight zoom and the globs of blood coming out when it. Yeah.
And then you had the regular one when they're in the station.
Yeah,
it's quiet and the music is creepy. Then McCoy turns around, he sees a rat, and then he walks into a body, and then you get this big, musical cue.
Yeah,
but he didn't scream. He's just like, Jim, and then they just they did their jobs because they're not they don't because they're professionals and they're
Right.
experienced. So but yeah, that was great. But in the motion picture, the terrifying part, there were two terrifying parts. The one where
Mm.
the one where the Commander Sonak,
Mm.
I think it was Commander Sonak,
Yeah.
he he tried to beam over, and there was
Became
not.
a transporter casserole.
He became
Yeah.
a transporter casserole, and that scream, that whole
Oh
process
yeah.
was so
Yeah.
scary.
Right.
I,
Because the imagery is not. It's all your imagination doing the imagery work, but the
and the
scream
sound
just
and the
the
scream, I was just
scream
like,
sells it. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then the way they reacted at the end.
Mm.
Oh yeah, and who's running the transporter. It
Yeoman
explains why she
Rand.
wasn't in the rest of the movies. Rand. I like Rand. It's a shame that they got rid of her, and I think they got rid of her because it was either her or Majel Barrett or something, and so
Mm.
because Roddenberry was fond of Majel Barrett, or Emily Hudak, I think was her. I think that's her real name, or her.
Yeah, or she's gone. I don't know what her birth name was, but prior to Star Trek, she would go by like Majel Hudak or Majel Lee Hudak. Maybe her real
Yeah,
name was Emily. Yeah, that the whole Grace Lee Whitney Yeoman Rand thing. That's there's a lot going on there, and it doesn't. If you really dig into it, Gene Roddenberry does not come off looking very well. So, I mean, I think
no,
honestly, I think it was probably right for the show that she left. I don't think that character really. I think I'm not sure it would have worked for that character for Kirk to have some of the freedom that he had, but I like. I mean, I like Grace Lee Whitney, and I liked the character. I'm not, and I don't think that's why. That's certainly not the only reason she was let go. Was to like, oh, we got to make sure Kirk has more opportunities for romance. That was part of it. But also, she was treated very badly. So yeah.
you know what I don't know if you know this. I was reading about this. I don't know where I read this. I can't really cite my source here, but in the 70s, I think she was at the unemployment office or something in LA, and DeForest Kelly sees her there. He's like, "Hey, come with me. You don't need this. Come do the conventions with us, and you'll be able to live off of this." And then she did. And
Yeah.
everybody, and when she went to the conventions, everybody loved her. She was there. The fans treated her. She got money.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was able to live off of that. And when I read that and heard about that, it really warmed my heart, because I
Yeah.
mean, when the original series ended, I mean, a lot of people were a lot of the actors, DeForest Kelly, William Shatner, Grace Lee Whitney, a lot of them were out of work, and they were typecasted. I mean, the only person that was still working was Nimoy, because he was on he was Paris in Mission Impossible, and he was probably doing who knows what else.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard. Yeah, Hollywood is a rough business, and it certainly was rougher then. I mean, now it's much more even common. I mean, how many conventions can you go to? And there's, one guy who did one voice in one video game one time, and now he can have this whole other career going to conventions. Back then, it wasn't a thing. And, it's particularly hard for a woman to grow old in Hollywood. I mean, that's not, and like I said, I mean, she wrote a book. It's called The Longest Trek, I believe, which will give you, it's a little bit lurid, but it's it goes over her whole life history. But I mean, she essentially was assaulted, sexually assaulted on the show.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep. No, I mean, yeah.
Was it someone on the production team, or was it someone outside?
It was someone on the production team.
Oh, no.
And she had struggles with substance abuse anyway that preceded that, but then got worse after that. And between that and then them thinking, well, maybe this character isn't right, she got the short end of the stick for sure in that situation. And I'm glad that she found, she had a very up and down life, and then later on,
this is news.
found
this is news.
Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't, I would just tell people, read the book. She doesn't name who the person was, but if you read between the lines, you can figure it out. So it's not any of the other cast, but
okay, that's good.
Yeah, but but I'm glad. But saying
So
about the convention,
the longest trek. All
the
right.
longest trek or my longest trek, I forget. It's came out when they were all writing books in like the late '90s or mid '90s or whenever that was. But
I am not Spock. Well, that was 70s.
yeah, those two came out earlier, but there was a quickly like Beyond Uhura, To the Stars by George Takei, Warp Factors by Walter Koenig, Scotty had, or James Doohan had one. They all came out with books in the
I need to
90s.
find them now. I need, because I don't think I could get enough. Like I started reading the Mark Cushman These Are the Voyages books just to learn the production stuff, to learn the
Yeah.
production behind each episode. Have you read all those? Or
Yeah, I've read those. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
it's surprising how much I'm like, I thought I knew a lot about Star Trek. I don't know anything. I don't know Jack.
Yeah.
I love rediscovering things and everything.
Oh, there's always more to learn. I mean, that's why I keep still interested in this, especially, because up until I found the online community, I would reread my old books, I'd watch the shows, and I thought I know everything there is to know. I know it all about this show. And then, in recent years, so many more books have come out. You learning from everybody else online, and I'm still learning new things about this show. So yeah, but the Cushman books, they're very, very comprehensive. There has been, there are a few errors in them from what I've heard. I don't have any way to verify anything, but for the most part, I think 90% of it is accurate. There,
there was an error on the tapes for the longest time. So Taste of Armageddon was listed as episode 23, production order episode 23, and Space Seed was listed as episode 24, but actually it was the reverse. So they got that wrong. And so I was like, holy crap. I had no idea. I had no idea until like recently, until I went to Wikipedia or maybe Memory Alpha, showed the production code. I was like, oh man, oh wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So if I asked you an episode number, like, could you pick it up immediately in production order? Oh, okay.
All right. Test me.
Well, I mean, I have to at least pick one that I know so I can, I mean, I have a decent sense of them in production order because they used to be rerun in production order, not in broadcast order. But now I've watched them in broadcast order and my brain is scrambled. So, but I'll pick one. Okay. So number 48.
The immunity syndrome with the amoeba.
All right. Yep. Okay. Well, you know what you're talking about. So good job.
So another YouTuber, Pops, has been watching the original series for the first time and been doing reviews. I actually linked his most recent review of the City on the Edge of Forever. So this is basically him just reacting to the episode. He's got some great insight, but he came to me. He's like, how should I do this? How should I watch them? I was like, if you really want to see progression, watch them in production order, because you see the changes as you go. So start with, he actually watched The Cage first. And what's funny is I was listening to an audiobook today, started an audiobook. It's called the first 50 years, Star Trek, the first 50 years or something. And so the one I had was the first 25. And so I was listening to a whole bunch of, it's basically made up of quotes from
the Mark A. Altman and Ed Gross books. Yes. The oral history. Yeah.
What was I getting at? But yeah, I was listening to that.
Sorry, like production order, your friend Pops or something.
Oh yeah. So so he was he started watching those so he started watching those in production order. And I didn't realize this, but I didn't realize The Cage was originally called The Menagerie.
Oh,
and that's why they named the Menagerie in the first season. That's one thing I learned. I was like, oh, I didn't know that either. So
yeah. Maybe they thought it was too, what is the quote that always gets used? Too cerebral or too cerebral. So they decided to call it The Cage. And then when they had the chance to revisit it, they went back to The Menagerie.
Yeah, The Cage was initially a weird one. I never really grasped what like the main message of that particular episode was. So I think now that I think of it, and maybe you can correct me, the main message of The Cage was basically that man cannot be confined like that. He has to be out there out there. He has to be free. He has to
Mm.
be learning and growing and exploring, which I think is, and which I think is a theme in a lot of other episodes as well. But I think that's the main takeaway, because I was like, is this about quality of life? Because you have Vina, who is actually an invalid, but but they gave her that illusion of beauty, that illusion that she can, I think that she can move. She's able or something. Well,
Mhm.
she's not in a wheelchair, but she's more able and everything. So that's, at
They
least
rebuilt
that's
me.
what the
Everything
menagerie.
works.
Yeah,
Everything works, but she just looked, yeah, but
so,
everything worked. She could move. Yeah.
so but the menagerie was really focused on that whole quality of life aspect, because
Mm.
Pike, Sean Kenny, Christopher Pike, Sean Kenny's the dude that kind of looks like
Yep.
Jeffrey Hunter, maybe even a little bit like Elvis. I actually thought he was Elvis when I was a kid. But
Oh, really? Okay.
handsome dude. But yeah, he was in the makeup. Yeah, he plays Lieutenant DePaul when he's not in makeup.
Yes, yes.
I didn't realize that was him, but yeah,
He's in 2 episodes. Yeah. A Taste of Armageddon is one of them, I believe. Yeah.
and Arena
And Arena. Yes. Yeah. He's
maintained
still going on.
status.
Actually, I have a friend who knows his son, but anyway,
Oh,
yeah.
is he still with us?
He's still with us. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I have to see if I could, like, I know, like, we're getting less and less people from the original series. So seeing someone from that era at a
Yeah.
convention is like gold. It's like
It
gold to me.
is.
So
Well, I like what you said about the theme for the cage or the menagerie, because I think sometimes people don't always understand original Star Trek or understand it in, y- Star Trek became, with TNG, with the movies, with later on, it became people always talk about Star Trek as being like this utopian future kind of thing, or that's uh, when it was getting popular in reruns, and Roddenberry was like, "Oh, I can't get away from the show, but maybe I can still make some money off it, or let's revisit this." He would do lectures at colleges, and he needed to have something to say, and so he needed to have a reason to explain why Star Trek was popular, and legitimately one of the reasons I think is because, yes, to some extent it paints this future where mankind has evolved past like racial differences, and is unified, and they're out, and that's certainly true, but he leaned into that big time, and more than it really was present in the show, because I think in the show, um at so many episodes, the theme is that as humans, we've got to fight against our baser instincts. We've got to struggle. We're not built for paradise. We can't be in some place where all our needs are being met.
maybe we
We
weren't meant for
pain.
paradise.
Maybe we weren't meant for paradise.
Yeah,
The music of the
side of
Lulu,
paradise. Yeah.
march to the sound of drums. Yeah, I mean, Gene Kuhn reinforced that. I think that was in Roddenberry's mind with the cage. Um, so I think a lot of original series, the humans aren't any more really advanced than than they are in the 20th century. They have better institutions, perhaps, but they always have to sort of um, be on guard against your darker instincts. And if you're in a situation where all your needs are being satisfied, that's not human. That's not happiness. That's I'm not saying I agree with that necessarily. I wouldn't mind a
Yeah.
little menagerie, get rid of my aches and pains with television illusions. But I think thematically in the show, it's often about having to struggle and needing a challenge and needing to
A
yeah,
reason to
challenge
live, a
yourself.
purpose, and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh yeah, and I mean, like, yeah, the whole, yeah, we have to crawl, we were meant to crawl our way,
Yeah,
or scratch our way, fight our
struggle,
way.
claw for every inch of the way.
I always think of, I forget which episode was where, um like, we're what episode does he say we're not going to kill today? Is that Taste of Armageddon?
That's Taste of Armageddon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
that's
like,
my favorite
he's
speech.
like,
Yeah.
we're like a non-7's the administrator on the planet Miniar 7, the planet that
Mhm.
fights its wars with computers. And Anon is like, that him and Kirk have a great discussion. Great actor David Opadashu. uh
Yes, yeah.
he's like, we are savage, you are barbarians, we are violent. And he's like,
Yeah.
or Kirk's like, the instinct can be fought. The
Mhm.
instinct can be fought. So I loved the fact that we could. I love that idea, and I've applied that to myself whenever I felt like,
Mm.
I was, whenever I get mad, or I feel, get angry or something like that. or want to kick something, I tell myself, I think about that scene. I think
Yeah.
you can fight this. I mean, you can fight your feelings and all that. I mean,
Yeah.
Spock, I mean, Mr. Spock fights his feelings every day. He has them. He has to live with the fact that he's human, and he has to live with the fact that he's Vulcan. He can and like you said, like a teenager, he would be embarrassed. He's embarrassed to show that emotional side to him and everything. That's what
Mhm.
made him interesting. I think the ladies wrote to him more than Shatner.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And Shatner, I heard Shatner was like really jealous of that, and Shatner tried to kind of demand
More lines.
more lines and everything. And I learned this because of stuff that Mr. George Takei has said about Shatner. He's like, oh, I don't like Shatner. He doesn't play well with the rest of us. And yeah, and everybody felt the same way. Koenig, during the Star Trek V press conference, he was directing. He did not even say Walter Koenig's name. He's like the guy that played Chekhov, and Walter Koenig's like, Walter Koenig, bro. You know, like what the heck? So, but that was a crap. That was a crap show. Like everything was going wrong. Harv Bennett looked like he wanted to pull his hair out, even though I don't think he had any hair. So it was just the whole thing was a crap show.
Well, I mean, it's interesting talking about Shatner. I mean, who always generates a lot of different opinions online. I mean, I think, and it's absolutely true that he would try to make sure he had at least as many lines as Nimoy in any given episode, and there was some pettiness. I think it was a very insecure time for him. I think, I think some of the stories have been overblown. I think to some extent, some of the actors are just there's a, what do you call it, audience capture, a little bit of a feedback loop, or oh yeah, I get some attention if I make fun of Shatner, and then I'll keep doing it again and again. I'm not saying he's a perfect guy, Shatner. I mean, you do star of a show, and he's had an ego, but I think when he started Star Trek, he was a young actor. He was very well regarded. He had these great appearances on television shows. He'd been in a couple movies. He never had a big break, but he was a very well regarded actor, and he was young. And it was in the early, mid 60s. And his style of, acting was theatrical. You could have a career with that. By the end of Star Trek, he's pushing 40. Television is going in a different, a more kind of naturalistic form of acting. His marriage has fallen apart. Financial, the troubles are on the horizon. I'm not surprised that he always had mixed feelings about Star Trek and was never at ease with the fandom the way some other people were. I think that was a hard time for him. And at that point, he's like, now he's just this corny actor who's pushing 40 versus like he was a young guy on his way up, just waiting for his break. So, I'm not saying that excuses, treating people poorly, but the fact is a lot of the guest stars in Star Trek had very positive things to say about him. So did many people that he worked with in other shows.
I heard
And even if you listen to some of the actors, I mean, listen to Walter Koenig, that interview with him on his talk show, what is it, Raw Nerve, super illuminating, super honest. Because he would say that, Bill, I recognize that you had the most talent. You were very creative. You're outspoken, but you never let us in. You're always like insecure. And I think both things are true.
So did he always like go like whenever they weren't shooting, he'd always go back to like his
trailer
or something?
I don't think so. I mean, you hear a lot of stories about him being sort of kind of fun on the set, sort of like an annoying, fun kid in a way. Like you can't get this guy to shut up, or he's always kind of wanting the center of attention. I think a lot of
I heard a lot of the
issues,
extras. I heard like Billy Blackburn and
he has great things to say about him.
I forget Mr.
Eddie
Leslie,
Paskey, Mr.
Eddie
Leslie, yeah.
Paskey, and then what was I forget the name of the double that was that stood in for Spock, handsome guy, black hair.
Oh,
what was his name?
It's an Italian name, Frank Da Vinci, I think. Frank Da Vinci. Or
yeah,
Vinci,
I heard that they all got along with Shatner pretty well. Like Shatner, like like you said, Shatner liked to joke around. He was pretty, like I always thought he was down to earth. He just wasn't like that with like George Takei or something, or Nichelle
Well,
Nichols. I know they didn't like him. They were at his roast. I don't know if you've ever seen the roast of William Shatner.
I have seen it. Yeah.
They were making more fun of George Takei than William Shatner. So when William Shatner, you guys suck. I agree. I actually agreed with them.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I like George Takei. I mean, I like all these guys, but it's just, I think some of the criticism hardened during the movies. I think, there were like, because in a TV show, there's, especially back then, you had 30 episodes a season or 25 episodes a season.
Yeah.
The movies, it's like, this is my shot for 2 years to do something with this. This is my shot. And, I think Shatner had enough influence on the set, certainly, that he, took moments away from the supporting characters in the movies. And I think that hardened them.
It was
understandably.
From what I read, I don't know how true this is because there's a lot of information that comes online. But according to what I read, Wrath of Khan. Now, George Takei barely had any role. He just had he had a few lines in the beginning, and he was, he had a few lines as a helmsman, but he didn't want to be. He wasn't interested in being in the movie, and it was actually William Shatner that got him to convince him to take the role, be in the movie, be part of it. Everything. So, I mean, it's fun. It's funny. I think it's true. I mean, I don't know if it is true. I don't know if you've heard about that.
That Shatner convinced Takei to be in Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
In Star Trek 2. I haven't heard that. I know he had to reach out to him or convince him to be in 5 a little bit because Takei was worried about Shatner being the director. I hadn't heard the story about 2.
Yeah, so Shatner was the director because he had to get whatever Leonard Nimoy got. I'm trying to understand. Yeah. I'm trying to understand that deal that they made with the studio or something.
Yeah, it has some name like equal. It's like a political sounding name, like equal rights contract or equal powers contract or something. I forget, but yeah, whatever one had. And I don't know when this wasn't true on the series, but I think it became true for the movies.
Yeah, especially when they're negotiating with Jeffrey Katzenberg or Michael Eisner. You always hear Nimoy mentioning Michael Eisner, and of course, the legendary meeting that he has after Wrath of Khan comes out. Michael Eisner's like, "Hey, you want to be part of Star Trek 3? Yes, I want to direct.
I want to direct.
What did you say? I want to direct." So yeah, so then that made history. Nimoy directed Star Trek 3, and then he became a director.
Yeah,
and his Star Trek 3. Extremely cinematic. I love the shots that he did, that he crafted for Star Trek 3. I loved them, and especially, because he's a natural photographer. I don't know who he hired to do the actual cinematography, but it was spectacular.
Yeah, I don't remember the gentleman's name. I know he had been around. I mean, he was on a pretty tight leash, is my understanding. Nimoy was with the studio because he hadn't. They're about to make a whatever it was, a $14 million movie, which doesn't sound like much now, but it was a reasonable amount then. I mean, it was still in the TV division, but I'm not sure if he got to choose who the cinematographer would be. It's I like Star Trek 3. I've always liked it. I think those of us who grew up, I think people who are a little older and grew up with the show before and the movies feel later to them, they maybe don't like it as much because I think the idea of the family thing that sort of developed a Star Trek that wasn't really in the concept for Star Trek. It took a while. You can go through most of the first season, and yes, Kirk and Spock are friends, but it really isn't until like season 2 that you start to get this trinity of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and it's about the family. I think some people don't like Star Trek. I mean, most people I know like it. There's just some people who don't, but they feel like there's so much emphasis on the relationships versus kind of like the science fiction sort of concepts that maybe they don't like it as well. But I've always liked it. I don't, some shots are really good in it, but I mean, it certainly has its budgetary constraints. I mean, the Genesis planet, maybe could look better, but it's it's got that incredible scene of stealing the Enterprise. I mean, who doesn't love that scene?
I love the music. I loved James Horner's little music.
Yeah. But It's funny. I've heard more criticism in Star Trek 3 in recent years than I've had, ever before. So
I heard
it's,
I heard one criticism from another YouTuber. We were talking about
mm,
it on his stream. He brought up, why didn't Sarek, who's like, he says top ambassadors, like one of the top ambassadors for
mm,
Federation, like why couldn't
pull
he
some strings.
pull some strings and get Kirk what he needed, or why didn't because he's the one that went to Kirk in the first place. Say,
Yeah.
why did you leave Spock on Genesis? He asked you to, dude. That was a powerful when he had to relive when he relived that moment. It was just
Yeah.
I mean, you just see Wrath of Khan. Wrath of Khan came out a couple years prior. For me, I saw it right after that. But you see that moment, and you see Shatner's performance. Him and Mark Leonard. Well, it was awesome seeing Mark Leonard come back, giving some continuity from the original series,
Yeah.
consistency. The nerd in me loves that stuff. But
Hmm.
that scene was so powerful. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Very moving and very sensitively shot and acted. I think some people, I mean, this is what I hear, but I sometimes hear criticism about it, well, like Nick Meyer, for example, didn't, he hated that idea of Spock coming back. It's like you're just
yeah, it's
walking
not
back
me.
all the
Yeah.
dramatic, investment of Star Trek 2 by, bringing this guy back. And, at the end of Star Trek 2, everyone's sort of
So
hopeful and, I feel young.
so
And
was
at the
it
beginning of
Harv?
Star Trek 3, they're not.
So was
Go
it
ahead.
Harv Bennett that had them do that scene? Remember, it's like we need something. They told Nimoy, it's like, hey, we need something to carry into the next film, and then he does. He comes up with remember and all that.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously wasn't an accident. I don't know who ultimately originated the idea. I know Bob Salem was more the hands-on producer. Um, but
I don't
yeah,
know.
they
I don't
probably,
know that name. I don't know that.
yeah, no,
Was
Robert
he like an
Salem.
assistant to Bennett? Harv Bennett?
Yeah, well, he was, um, yes, was his title, but I don't remember his exact title. But I think if there's been a couple interviews with him in recent years, Inglorious Treksperts has a fabulous one, and I think he was actually doing a lot more of the hands-on producing than Harv was in that movie. But regardless, it's whether you think they should have brought Spock back or not. I mean, if you're going to have another, he's such a fundamental character to why that show is popular. I mean, I love William Shatner, I love Captain Kirk, but in terms of like an iconic character from that show, it's Mr. Spock. I mean, you got to bring him back, and it's science fiction, so go ahead. So I never really held that against the movie too much. I know some people do, but I think most of us who grew up with the movies, rather than finding them, later in life, are pretty accepting and enjoy Star Trek 3.
I mean, I always thought that the movies were made for the people that watched the series when they were younger. So like like my parents were kids in the 60s. So by the time the 70s and 80s came out, they were already older. They were adult. My parents were married and all that. And so I always thought, like I always felt like, it was just like, time. It was just like, it was for those that waited. Like kind of like how Tolkien wrote The Hobbit for kids that were,
Hmm.
born in the 20s and late 10s and all that. And then when he wrote Lord of the Rings, or when he published Lord of the Rings, it was more mature. It was for those same. It was basically for that same generation, but they were already they were already older. They were married. His son Christopher was already a dad, and he was already
Mm.
a veteran
Yeah.
himself. So I feel like those movies were made for like for those who were younger in the 60s, and it was just to show that the passage of time. And it's just about getting older. And I thought Wrath of Khan, that was the main theme of it.
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan was just the idea of getting older. And there's one great channel. I know there's one great channel that said basically, it seems like there's more for Kirk. There's more days. There's his better days are behind him than forward. And
Hmm.
in the movie, he realizes going through the entire experience that
Yeah.
no, it's actually his better days are forward. And he says at the end, "I feel young."
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
powerful. It's such a power. And this is after the whole Spock. This is after everything that happened. The fight with the battle with Khan, which was
Hmm.
awesome. And and then you had the whole thing with Spock and his passing and this funeral. It was, and
Yeah.
then coming to terms with this. That movie had so much going on, like so
Yeah.
much was going on. It's just, it
And
was
it's,
such it's one of my favorite,
yeah,
it's one of the best movies ever made, in my opinion.
it's a great movie. And it's so rare to have a movie that nails the landing, that, so many movies start great and then they like run out of steam, or like it does it.
Yeah.
But it's bookended so well with, the quotes from whatever it is, Great Expectations or Tale of Two Cities. I can't remember.
Tale of Two
Thank you.
Cities, and of
Um,
course, Moby Dick.
yeah, yes, and it's just, but yeah, thematically, the content about finding relevance, finding meaning, even as you're aging, and this loyalty, and how they swap going into three. Which this is another reason I love three, is because how they swap that line of the needs of the many and the needs of the few, or the one, and turning it on its head, and realize these are both true. It's just depending
Yeah.
where your perspective is. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have any complaints about Star Trek 2. I love that movie. It's my favorite of the Star Trek movies, by a lot. I wish they had spent a little more time on the extras, in the background. But
I agree.
um
I liked
particularly with
how,
Khan. But yeah.
yeah. So so I felt like, I think, so I understand why, like, part of the reason why I believe that that story about George Takei not wanting to be in the film is because of how little that he had to do. I
Hmm.
mean, him and Nichelle Nichols, like they had very little to
Very
do. I
little to
mean,
do in that
they
movie.
were just,
Or James Doohan didn't have, well, I guess he had a scene with his
James Doohan
nephew.
had a nephew, and yeah, that was the one. Okay, there's one issue I have with Wrath of Khan that kind of does take me out of it. It's a very dramatic scene, very powerful, but why would he take him? Like, did he think he was
To
dead?
the bridge.
Yeah, why would he take him to the bridge? Go to the. I mean, if he's alarmed for sick bay, I mean,
Yeah.
like you're responsible for
Well,
your
Khan's,
nephew's death.
the attack, damaged the turbo lift. So, when you
Okay.
said sick bay, it misheard and it went to the bridge or something,
Yeah.
maybe
So
something like that.
I'm
But,
curious if there's in universe reason.
and
So,
then, yeah, it's
but
funny. I
that
like that. I mean, I love when people try to find in-universe reasons for things that really don't have them, but it's fun to think about. But yeah, what a great movie that is.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen. I'm sure you've seen the director's version, which has like 2 minutes of additional stuff. Basically, I think the entire they basically cut out that whole nephew.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
Peter
still in the
Preston.
movie, but they cut out, like, there was additional, I think, stuff with
You don't know
him.
he's his nephew except for the extended version, right? Or do
Yeah,
they
that's
even?
right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We just, or no, he says, I think, no, I think Scotty does say that's my sister's youngest or something. I think
Oh,
in both versions.
okay, okay.
But and then he just like, but then there's like, he's like, why, when his nephew dies, and then of course
Hmm.
Kirk has to explain that, oh, Khan came back and all that. And I think
Yeah,
they cut that. They felt like, yeah, we don't need to hear this again or something. So like, they don't want to hear, they don't want the audience to hear, redundant information. So I think that's why they cut it.
yeah,
I'm okay with it because it's Wrath of Khan, and it's just, I can forgive that because it's such an awesome movie. But yeah, that was probably the reason why it was cut. But yeah, I had no idea it was the same kid, the same actor from Return and Escape from Witch Mountain. I've seen both of those
oh
70s
yeah.
movies. I actually, Escape from Witch Mountain is a really good movie. I watched, I saw that one as an adult, and I was like, that's a great movie. So yeah, that was Ike
Ike
Eisenman.
Eisenman. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I vaguely remember that, Escape from Witch Mountain. But yeah, my I like those in it because, really, even though I saw it in the theater, it settled into my memory watching the version I taped off TV, like the ABC whatever Sunday night movie version, which had that additional material in it. I mean, you didn't have to wait for the DVD or whatever to come. I mean, I'm sure it was in the VHS, but it was in the TV movie version as well. So yeah, when I remember, I think I must have bought the VHS and it didn't have that in, and I'm like, what? Where's the scene where he says you're as blind as a Tiberian bat, or the little extension in the sick bay? I mean, I guess it's not, either way, it's not a big deal, but yeah, it's just but I do think thematically it's a very strong movie.
I agree. So, uh, so first time seeing Warren Erickson here. Welcome. The lighting of the original of TOS, the
Hmm.
original series. So one thing that really drew me to the original series when I was younger. Once again, I was a big Nintendo fan. Mario games and
Mm.
Zelda games were very colorful. Nintendo put a lot of color into their video games, and the original Star Trek, compared
Mm.
to how shows, shows in the 80s and 90s were, Star Trek was extremely colorful, and that was part of what I liked. I liked that. I liked the music. I liked the very dramatic music. I mean, I still prefer Fred Steiner's cello version of the
Hmm.
original series. Alexander Courage's opening of the
Hmm.
original series. I love that version. And honestly, I mean, when it comes to music, I wanted to play some of it. I want to play because I have some of it downloaded here in the studio, but it was kind of messing with our audio, so I
Okay.
turned it off. But I have a whole bunch of Fred Steiner stuff that I
Yeah.
love. I love his Mud's Women stuff that he
Yeah. Oh,
did.
yeah. Yeah.
My outro has a couple of his stuff from Mud's Women, and I love his Charlie X. His Charlie X stuff is
Yeah. Yeah.
great. So I'm just curious, like, how do you feel about the? I love the music of Star Trek. I saw the 50th anniversary performance, and it drove me to tears. It's such good stuff. But I love the
Yeah.
original. And it's La La Land Records did
Hmm.
something I never thought would happen. They released the entire score of the
They
original
did.
series. I couldn't
Yes.
believe it
Yes,
because
indeed.
I wanted it since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I wanted to rock around with my Walkman or my Discman.
Isn't
I
it surreal to listen to that? Like after, you have such strong
Yeah,
associations with all of these music cues. Yeah. I mean, you said the lighting and the music, and there's so many things that came together to make the original series Star Trek just like such a special phenomenon. I mean, part of it was, the serious science fiction. Part of it was the particular actors. I mean, the serendipity of Shatner and Nimoy getting the roles that they got, and the chemistry that they had. Even while they were kind of, it was a love-hate relationship. They just, they made those characters into something special. But also things like the music and like the lighting. I mean, you know there were other shows in the 60s that were colorful. Batman's an example, but Gilligan's Island, I Dream of Jeannie. But the way the lighting was brought across with the cinematography, this kind of like film noir in color. You think the shadow, the lighting on the eyes, the dramatic kind of sort of theatrical. They don't make any sense, some of the shadows on the walls or some of the lighting patches on the walls, but it creates a very atmospheric um kind of like an ambiance for this. No other show looked like that. I mean, I remember like when I was young and I would watch Star Trek. I figured, oh, that's just how shows were in the 60s. But then watching some of the other shows, yeah, I see color, but I didn't see this really dramatic, severe lighting that was done in service of the emotional mood of whatever the scene was. That it's just, I don't want to say it's unique, but it's extremely important to the show's popularity, I think. And the music, yeah, I mean, the variety in there, I mean, the heartbreak, the passion, the action. I mean, you can listen to those scores independently. You don't, even if you have the associations. I mean, they're good pieces of music.
is
And
there a
yeah,
particular music cue that you like? Do you have a favorite music
uh,
cue from
yeah,
an episode or from a particular moment?
I don't know. That's like asking what's your favorite emotion. I mean, it could be joy one day, it could be heartbreak another day. I mean, I do like, I mean, I like all the composers. I think Fred Steiner is the most idiomatic of all of them. I think his stuff, in a way, because it's not as specific as some of the other composers did score, like Gerald Fried or yeah, anyway,
Joseph
others.
Mullendor.
Joseph
Yeah,
Mullendor, that you strongly, or a Soul Kaplan, you hear that music, you think Doomsday Machine. You hear the fights, the Amok Time fights, you think Amok Time.
yeah.
Fred Steiner's music, because it was sampled so much, but it's more general too. It's serviceable in a lot of situations. Um, So, but I don't have a favorite cue. I do have a
I
fondness for Gerald Fried because he was an oboist and I play oboe, so I do like
Gerald
that.
Fried, did he do?
He did a mock time
He did a mock
and
time. Did he do
shore
Shore
leave.
Leave? Okay, he
Yep.
did Shore Leave. Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
and the one with Miramani, Paradise Syndrome,
Paradise. Oh, that was a sad one.
and Friday's Child. Yeah, he did. He didn't do a ton, but he did probably about 5 or 6. I think
Okay.
Steiner did the most.
Yeah, my favorite. So one thing that I used to keep track of as a kid, this is how nerdy I was. I used to keep track of the ending cues of,
Mm.
especially the first, well, each season. So I used to like how many episodes has this particular cue. There was only one. There was Spock's Brain was the only episode that had that one ending musical cue that. Alone, it was exclusive to that episode. It did not appear in anything else. But like my favorite one I have in my outro is the Fred Steiner one, the very gloomy, brooding, darker ending of it's so like episodes that had this ending had this ending musical cue. Mud's Women had it. The Alternative Factor would have Lazarus had that. Charlie
Mm-hmm.
X
City
would
on
have
the Edge of Forever.
Charlie. City on the Edge of Forever. You know exactly what I'm
I
talking
know
about.
the cue you're
Do
talking about.
do do do
Yeah.
do. Yeah, that one. Yeah. I always
Chills with that.
get chills every time I hear that. But that's the one that I use for my outro, my outro and everything.
Okay.
So, and
Yeah.
I don't get hit. So if you play like the original, if you play the Alexander Courage theme, you will get hit by copyright because I do, I do a lot of YouTube
Oh,
and stuff. But
yeah.
music's the big thing that gets copyrighted quite a bit. But like the scores
Hmm.
don't get hit. So I can play the scores without getting into any trouble. So
Okay.
just don't play the original series thing. That's going to be hits because the bots know what to look for that. But
Oh, interesting. But yeah, I mean, it was so of a piece with the show. I mean, that's another reason I don't like to watch the remastered effects that they did in 2006. Although I think they were tastefully done, it just feels like this show is such a unitary thing. The effects, the music, the lighting, the acting. It's
yes,
just you just keep it how it is. It's an artifact.
what
Um,
did you think of? So the one thing I did like about the remastered versions was that there were times where they had to reuse the same matte painting. So like Dagger of the
mhm.
Mind reused the matte painting from Where No Man's Gone Before. So the Tantalus
They
penal
changed it a little
colony
bit,
had
but it's
the
the same.
oh, did they? Oh,
A
okay.
little bit, like the lithium cracking station had tall vertical
Yeah.
components in one of the episodes, and the other episode it didn't. But
Yeah, and the only other notable one that I remember was Flint's.
Requiem for Methuselah, yeah,
Requiem for Methuselah used the same portrait as the cage, the Rigel 7
7,
fortress, where I forgot the creature that attacks
yeah, the
Pike is
Kalar,
the
yeah.
Kalar. Yeah, and then what's funny is they named the Klingon. They named Susie Plaxton's character that Worf may
Oh,
or may
right.
not have done something to on the holodeck in an episode. And then,
Okay.
oh hey, here's your son, Worf. Worf, you have a son.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah,
Uh,
Kalar. That's why when he said Kalar, I was like, oh okay.
yeah. Yeah. Well, for years I thought she was saying the killer, but no, she's saying the Kalar, which, when I finally saw the
Yeah, I thought that was the
closed
killer
captioning,
too. I thought she said the killer too. That's interesting.
apparently in the script it says Kalar, so it's just whatever, the alien or the guy. Yeah, I know the map paintings you mean, but and yeah, I mean obviously reusing them was just to save some money, but
There was one other thing
I
that I
still
did.
like the old ones.
There was one other thing. Okay, that's fair enough. There was one other thing I did like about the remastered versions.
Hmm.
You got to see the ships that you didn't get to see. So you got to see the
Yeah,
fleet. You got to see the Klingon fleet and Errand of Mercy. I thought that was awesome. I was like,
true.
and then I was when I bought the Blu-rays for the first time. I was like, please let us see the Gorn ship. Please let us see the Gorn ship. Please let us see the Gorn ship. And we see the Gorn ship, but it's far away.
Yeah,
It's,
right,
it's
right.
far away, so we don't really get a good look at it. But I was happy to see something. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean I think they like I said, they did a tasteful job. There's some interest. I like seeing the Gorn blink. You know,
Yeah,
achieving
I thought that was funny too. Yeah, but
but
what?
you know, I have such respect for what they were able to accomplish with those effects on a TV time frame with a TV budget. I mean, you know, it's easy to laugh at them now, but but a lot of them still hold up. I mean,
Yeah,
some of them not as much, but I just think keep that stuff there. I
I
have
got.
both anyway. Have both.
I have a question for you. Do you think they'll come out with a 4K for that? That they'll just take the Blu-rays of the original series and make a 4K like they did with the movies, or do you think that's possible that maybe they're not going to do that?
If they think they can make money on it, they will do it. But I don't know the calculations that are involved. I mean, you know, I never have bought the Blu-ray. I still have my old DVDs that I watch because
Okay,
I mean,
which DVDs do you have? The 2 episode volumes that they came out with initially, or did you buy like the seasons when they came out? Because the
I
seasons
bought
came
those
out
seasons
much
that were in
later,
those capsules.
in
And
those capsules. Yeah, I know
yeah,
exactly. I had those too.
yeah,
Yeah, I
2004 or so, I think. Yeah, or
because
five maybe.
yeah, because I had and so yeah, so I never so let me tell you so when 2004 hit was when those DVDs came out was when I finally watched the entire original series because it was not on TV here. We didn't have cable,
Hmm.
and I was on a journey to collect as many of the VHSs as I could. And after maybe from the age of 12 to the age of 20, I
Hmm.
managed to collect 50 VHS tapes out of the 79.
Nine. Yeah.
So I didn't see them all until those DVDs.
Oh, okay.
So this was a long journey. This was a long journey for me.
Yeah. Wow.
So I've seen some episodes more than others. So season one
Yeah.
episodes I've seen exponentially more than seasons 2 and 3. And
Mm.
I don't know where you rank the seasons. I think season one was the best. I think season one had the best music, had the best drama, had the
Hmm.
best had the best stories in my opinion. And then
Mm.
I feel, and it was the least cheesy. I mean, there was cheesiness, but I feel like it was the least cheesy out of the three. I think third season was obviously the cheesiest. You had you had For the World Is Hollow, I Touch the Sky was pretty cheesy, especially the dude goes insane, just runs to the engineering and just and he's fighting everybody, and you could tell it was a stunt
Oh,
man and all
yeah,
that.
yeah. Is There in Truth No Beauty? That one, I think,
Oh
is the
yeah,
one where
sorry.
the
So
guy. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I got that. Yeah, I got that mixed up. So
But
even I
but yeah,
couldn't.
the season 3 is definitely the least well regarded, and for good reasons. Yeah, I think it's the weakest. But
Like
um,
it seemed like they didn't have like I think they had the same writers, so they managed to get like didn't they get like a lot of the same writers back or something, or
for
did they
season
not?
3,
Yeah,
no, they had a lot of new writers actually. I mean, it started with some of the older ones.
I
Gene Coon
know
was off the show, and but he did a couple episodes
Lee Cronin.
pseudonymously. Yeah.
Yeah, Lee Cronin. Yeah,
Um,
Spock's Brain.
these
He did write Spock's Brain.
He did, yeah. And
His
you know,
brain is gone.
DC Fontana was still, but like halfway or maybe a quarter into the season, you know, there was more of a shakeup, and you know, like Bob Justman left, DC Fontana left,
Gene
and
Roddenberry left.
yeah, I mean, I've heard different things there. I mean, he's certainly not as involved, but you
Yeah,
know,
Fred Freiberger took
Brett
over
Freiberger was sure the line, but you know, Roddenberry hadn't been the line producer since the early part of season 1. But they got a lot of different. I mean, one interesting thing about season 3 is they had a lot of women writers. You know, Jean Lizetta Roast and oh gosh, I'm
Margaret
not going to
Harmon
remember
wrote the
Margaret
Paradise.
Arman.
She wrote the
Thank you.
Paradise
Yeah,
Syndrome and
yeah,
Gamesters of Triskelion.
and
What's funny is
Gamesters
I
of
bought both of
Triskelion.
those episodes together
Oh,
at one point. So and it was the
the
same
Margaret
writer.
Arment edition.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, I think season 3, like, if I had to pick a season, that I liked the best, I would certainly pick the first season. If I had to pick a stretch where Star Trek was peak, I wouldn't pick a season. I would pick a year. I would pick 1967, which, you know, that's kind of the latter half of season 1 and the first half of season 2,
Yes.
when Gene Coon was the line producer. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have all my personal favorite episodes in it, but I think that's when Star Trek was peaking, where, you know, I think that you just had a lot of really just banger episodes that were great. And, you know, they had the right balance of humor and adventure and pathos and everything else. And yeah, I think that was at its peak. When people think of Star Trek, that's what they should think of.
Yeah, and you had, I mean, yeah, you had a lot of excellent writers. I mean, um, you had George Clayton Johnson,
Yeah,
who wrote The Man
Man
Trap. You
Trap,
had Samuel Peoples, so I think he wrote the second pilot. If I'm,
where no man has gone before. Yeah,
you know,
he
I
also
thought,
did it. He also did a version for I think for Star Trek 2. When they were trying to figure out a script for Star Trek 2, he did a version that involved like aliens
this
coming
bef-
and
oh, was this before Harv Bennett? At least everybody knows the story. Harv Bennett watched all the episodes and
yes.
identified Spacey as the one to make a movie based on, or a sequel or movie based off of, and all that. So this was before all that.
Well, it was after he had seen that, and they knew Khan was going to be in it, but they didn't know what else was going to be happening. And they had a couple different, like Harv Bennett did a treatment, Sam Peoples, I'm pretty sure.
I
Maybe I
forget
should have fact checked did a
I
treatment.
forget where did the Genesis idea originate? Who
Yeah,
originated
I
that?
don't know
Who
who
brought that
originated,
to that table?
but this is what I'm saying. Like several different people all brought different things. One
Yes.
person like brought the Savick, one person brought the Genesis, one person brought Spock dying, one person brought
Well,
Khan,
I think
and then
Nimoy. I
Nick
think
Meyer
Nimoy.
took all of that
Yeah,
stuff and put it together, and
I
it
think
was a
Nimoy
great
brought the
result.
Spock dying because I think that was. I think
Yeah,
that's what he negotiated for.
true. Yes.
Now, I heard. Now, is it true that Gene Roddenberry leaked the fact that Spock died, and that's why everybody knew about it?
Yes, and I think the way they know that, and I'm trying to remember, maybe this was in the Bob Salen episode I referred to earlier of Inglorious Trexperts, that when they when they shared scripts with people, in the studio, um, they knew who had which script because they didn't have the same star dates. Like it was a little sneaky thing to know, like if there was a copy of a page of a script that got leaked or something, they could look at the star date there and know it was this guy's copy. This was Roddenberry's copy because his star date says 543.2 and the other one says 52984. I don't know why they would have done that, but that's what I heard. I mean, I heard that, and I think Susan Sackett may have confirmed that too, who was his assistant. But yeah, I mean, and certainly Roddenberry was feeling frustrated at that point,
Yeah, he
or
was
wanting to
kicked.
feel like
He was kicked upstairs, and because
yeah,
motion picture was extremely expensive, and
yeah,
like the critics were like very critical of it because they didn't feel like it was. What's weird was like it was just like 2001. It had a lot in common with 2001. And it had a lot in common with Close Encounters. It was just that highbrow, very slow. It was just a very slow movie.
yeah.
That
I
it
liked it.
wasn't your typical action adventure. It was
Not
going
at
out into
all.
space and discovering life, which is basically what Star Trek is.
Yeah.
So, and they
I
haven't
mean,
really done that with any of the other films.
no, they really haven't. The other films have been a lot smaller in scope, I think you could say. But
Copying Wrath of Khan, basically. Or
it's hard. It's hard when you're successful. It's hard to once you're successful at something, especially something like a movie where it costs millions of dollars. There's tens of there's hundreds of people involved that have to approve it and sign off on it and give you funding. Once you had a success, it's like there's a lot of pressure to do the same thing again. I mean, the same reason like after Star Trek 4, it's like, why is there all this humor in Star Trek 5? This is not the right tone for this movie. This could potentially have had a big dramatic scope kind of thing like Star Trek 1, but we Star Trek 4 was a success with the humor, so let's put in some Scotty hitting his head on the thing, or let's put in whatever. They
I liked it
and
better
just
when he was dead. I liked him better when he died,
I
Jim.
liked
I'm
him
like,
better before he died. Yeah,
I laughed
I mean,
out.
some
I
of the
laughed
jokes are
going, yeah.
funny. Some of the jokes are funny, but it's
How
like,
come you don't know row your boat?
but is it really? I don't know. I think the tone of that movie is messed up. Star Trek 1.
Yeah.
The comparison I like to make is, if Star Trek 2 is Lord of the Rings, the motion picture is the Silmarillion.
Yes,
It's
it is.
kind of like it's more remote, it's kind of distant, it's colder, and it's very grand,
When you say
but it's not
colder,
as audience friendly.
when you say okay, so when you say
Colder.
colder, that's basically what you mean is not audience friendly. Like it's for It's more, yeah, it's more
Like you said,
highbrow, it's more
slower, highbrow.
cerebral. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I mean, I think there has been efforts to produce different versions of the motion picture, the director's edition, and then they redid the other one just a couple of years ago. Darren Doctorman was involved with that I think are better. And I think there are some legitimate, I think the version that came out in 1979 is not that version of not that version of the movie at its best. I think there's
I heard
more.
it wasn't complete, and that's kind of why they
Yeah, I
went back
mean,
and
I've
did the
heard.
director's version. And yeah, that's, to
Yeah,
me, that's the definitive version. I have it right here. Yes,
yeah.
I love that version.
It gives you more with Spock, and that gives
Yes.
him some closure for that. As V'ger, what I was as V'ger is, when I came aboard, you know what I'm talking about, the part where he's like comparing himself to V'ger, like searching for something, looking
Is
for
there anything
answers, and then,
more? Is there
is this
anything
all
more
that
than
I
what I
am?
am?
Is there
Is this
nothing
all I
more?
am? And that's
Yeah,
that's something that we always think about. Like, is that, is there more? Is there more than we could do? Is there a greater purpose? As
yeah,
we go forward, as we get older.
yeah. Which is, I mean, I think Star Trek, it's great to have those big, high concept ideas, but you know, and this is also the problem with movies versus a TV show. With a TV show, you can have a Trouble with Tribbles. You can have Where No Man Has Gone Before. You can have The Empath. You can have a lot of different things, and it still works because it's still all your characters. There's consistency. With a movie, you got to pick one tone. You can't. And Star Trek. I think at its best, it does have a little humor in it. I think, or a little twinkle to it.
Even
It
Wrath
can't
of
be too
Khan.
stodgy.
Even
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Jim,
Star Trek 2 is the right balance. I
Jim,
think Star Trek
be
2.
careful. Jim, be careful.
We will.
We will, jerk.
Yeah. So I think the first movie, it does well with like the science fiction ideas and some characters, but it's also missing a lot that made Star Trek popular. It's missing some action, it's missing some humor, and it didn't really have any of that. So it doesn't feel complete somehow.
The motion picture you're talking about.
The motion picture I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because the original series had that. Like, yeah, there was like, we didn't even see a phaser. Don't fire that phaser.
That's right.
Fire photon torpedoes,
Yeah.
because they're in the wormhole and everything is slow because
Yeah.
they tried to go to warp without testing the warp engines, like that. I thought that was great. It was weird when I first saw it.
It was weird,
trippy.
yeah.
I was like, what is that? That was, I mean, I wouldn't say that was a horror element, but it was
Yeah.
unsettling. It was just unsettling and just weird it was just weird for me. So
yeah, definitely.
But that's why I miss about 70s and 80s science fiction, like especially stuff before I was born. It's just, yeah, it just, there's that magic there that I mean, now science fiction is just like a dime, like a nickel, a penny a dozen. I wouldn't say dime a dozen, a penny a dozen. Now there's so much content out there that's just like, it's a swamp, and you have to find like a diamond. You have to find the diamond in the swamp or something, or needle.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of why it became popular, honestly, is because of video games in a way, as science fiction in general and fantasy I'm talking about. I mean, because certainly when I was going to conventions in 1986 or whenever it was as a little kid, I wasn't telling my other people at school I was doing that. This was not cool. Cosplay was not cool. Now it's like I can't get tickets to the Renaissance Festival because it's like everybody wants to do this kind of thing.
It's popular now, yeah.
I really think what changed in part was, I don't know, geekdom in general being more accepted, and like computer science, you can get a good job with this, but also like video games. Once video games got really graphical, and they lend themselves to fantasy and science fiction, then every normie was playing video games too, and it's like, yeah, there's not that big of a leap to like movies. And sure, I'll watch a superhero movie. It's cool.
Video games, like, I mean, games like the original Metroid, which was
itself, great. The music in that game,
yes. And I mean, that game was heavily inspired from Alien, the first Alien movie. And what's funny is the second Metroid game for the Game Boy was heavily inspired by Aliens. Go back to the planet, or go to the home and wipe out the Metroids or the aliens, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, the music, yeah, I love the
Oh yeah.
Metroid. I had a clip in my intro of the game Metroid Prime
Okay.
for the GameCube. Is so they went from being a side scroller to a first
Mm.
person adventure. So you basically, it's like a first person shooter, but it's exploration based. So
Okay. Okay.
so things are still trying to kill you,
Yeah.
but you're still,
You
trying to
also
figure out
figure stuff out.
yeah, figure stuff out, finding
Hmm.
upgrades that allow you to explore more of the world. And yeah,
Hmm.
but yeah, games like Metroid, games like Mass Effect, which were heavily inspired by,
Hmm.
by Aliens, by Babylon 5, especially Babylon 5, the whole Reapers versus the
Oh,
Shadows,
right.
and
Yes.
ancient aliens that will wipe out younger races if they don't know how to defend themselves. It's stuff like that. Mass Effect was big. Halo,
Hmm.
like a lot of science fiction. Star Wars franchise has so many video games to play
Yeah.
that I used to
Yeah.
love to play. That took place either after Return of the Jedi or in between the prequels and all that. I
Yeah.
mean, it really did build Star Trek. I know Star Trek had games. I played one game. It was called Starfleet Academy, and it was basically doing simulations of the Wrath of Khan, Star Trek
Hmm.
Six, I think Balance of Terror was one,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was just typical, select long short term sensors, long range sensors,
Okay.
red alert red alert versus yellow alert. I learned that red alert activates phasers, yellow alert just activates the shields or the main screens or something. I got a
Okay.
question. Okay, I got a
Mm.
question for you. So is there a difference between screens and shields? Because they use the term screens in Arena,
Yeah.
but they use shields in other episodes. So is there a difference, or is
I
just like inconsistency in the writing?
I think it's just inconsistency in the writing. Yeah, I think I remember them using both, and yeah, I think they're both. The implication is the same. I mean, it's different from the deflectors, but the shields and screens, I think, are the same thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's amazing that show is consistent as it is, given the constraints under which it was produced and the novelty of it. I mean, it's amazing, really. But I kind of like that there's so many little
So,
inconsistencies in it too,
so many
especially to
writer
like scramble the brains of people who like really want to make all this stuff add up, and the canon is this and this, but the original series is not consistent with itself, let alone other series.
Yes, so many writers were alienated by Mr. Roddenberry because
Mm,
of the fact that he used to rewrite everything, or
yeah.
he would have other people rewrite stuff. But yeah, just because of the fact that he's like, oh, they wouldn't do this. Kirk wouldn't do this. Spock wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a big thing now with a lot of critics today, especially online critics. I mean, even me, like you start to see inconsistencies, and then that
Mm,
becomes a criticism. And some of my issues with modern entertainment is that they don't do what Mr. Roddenberry did, and they actually put in the work to try to make something consistent. Because I'll be honest,
yeah.
part of being a nerd is really liking, at least for me, is liking that consistency. Because when you make something consistent, it looks like they put the work in, they put the effort in to make it, like a single, make it one, basically make it
Hmm.
unified. Everything just fits together perfectly, and I like that. I like it when things fit together.
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
doesn't?
I think with this, I mean, it's so much harder in something like a TV show rather than a novel, which is, the product of a unitary mind, and a TV show where you've got writers, directors, producers, actors, everybody is making notes or making little tweaks. I think he does get criticized for doing the rewriting, but I absolutely think it was good in the long run that they needed at the beginning when he was really involved, someone to establish what this was about. I mean, the famous story of Harlan Ellison and the original
Yes, I
script
was
for
going to bring
City
that
on the
up.
Edge of Forever,
Mhm.
who I don't know anyone who has read that original script who thinks it's better than what came afterwards. I mean, it's certainly not Star Trek. It's not our characters that we know. So I think you needed someone to try to
Rein it in. Yeah.
guide the ship a little bit literally. But
Harlan,
if you're a writer with an ego, you don't want to deal with that.
yeah, and Harlan Ellison, everybody knew. be difficult. I mean,
Yes.
he was known to be difficult, but he was, I mean, like he used to have a place where he'd let people stay as long as they wrote. He'd give
Yes.
writers
Yeah.
a place to live. He'd let them as long as they wrote and everything.
Hmm.
But he wrote a lot of dark stuff. Like
He did.
he inspired the Terminator with the whole time travel of two soldiers coming back in time. They stole that
Mhm.
idea. He found out. He made sure they put his name in the credits for Terminator, based on a
Mm.
story by Harlan Ellison.
Okay.
But if I remember correctly, I have not read the script. I did learn a few things. I just don't remember what those were. So one of the differences, and correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the episode end with Edith Keeler being pushed by Spock into the truck?
No, she's not pushed, but what
Okay.
happens is Kirk freezes. He's not able to make a decision. It's too much for him. And it's Spock who prevents McCoy from saving Edith Keeler. So it's still, no one's pushing her into the truck,
Oh, okay.
but they're preventing her from being saved. It's Spock who does, and you can't, it had to be Kirk. You're right. I mean, the way
Yes.
the show was, the way
Yeah.
that's who it had to be.
Kirk found
Um,
her quite uncommon.
yes.
I mean, and
Yeah.
this was just, I just watched the episode 2 days ago because Pops released the
Okay.
video. He talked about things, and then I rewatched the episode because he had some questions. I was like, I didn't pick up on the words that were said, but yeah, he finds her uncommon because she basically predicts the future. She has the
Yeah.
insight to predict the future, and and not only that, but like the currents and eddies of time, because and how they get to that same point, McCoy and then them, they get to that same points because a big thing is going to happen. A major, like this
Mhm.
Edith Keeler is a major, as they say, a major focal point, and whatever her history is, or whatever her fate is, it will affect the entire world. But on the other side of that idea, the other side of that idea, and I never thought about this.
Hmm.
Remember the bum? Remember the bum that
Yeah.
McCoy encounters right after he goes into the portal, and McCoy just appears. He's still cordrazined out of his damn mind.
He takes the phaser and
Assassins.
yeah.
Yeah. Now I never thought of this. In the original show, in the original version, I always thought he pressed like the overload button and then it caused him to vaporize or something. But in the newer version, he actually points the phaser. I never realized he points the phaser at himself without knowing it, and he kills himself, vaporizes himself. And the thing is, it's never mentioned in the rest of the episode. And to me, that says that this man is, so Edith Keeler is a focal point, but not every person
Right.
is going to have an effect on the currents and eddies of time. And
Right.
that gentleman, that homeless guy, the one that calls, Edith Keeler abroad, you got to listen, all that.
Right.
Nobody noticed he was dead.
Yes.
And nothing changed. And to me, that was just a dark way of saying not everybody has an effect on the timeline. They kind of said that a little bit in Tomorrow Is Yesterday,
Right.
with Captain Christopher. It's like you haven't done anything. There's nothing you can do, because they were going to keep him on the ship, this is kind of a dark. It's a little but you're going to get in the dark territory there. But then they find out, oh wait, you're going to have a son. It's like, I don't have a son yet.
Not yet.
For Christopher.
Yeah.
And then then there you go. But it gets, the time travel thing, I mean, is hit or miss, but I think City on the Edge of Forever nailed it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a reason it's so well regarded. I love that contrast there. I hadn't thought about it in that way. That
I never thought of it either until I watched the
Yeah.
episode, and Pops brought up a question like, why wasn't this ever mentioned again? I never thought of that. And I was watching the episode, paying attention to the dialogue. I was like, okay, I might understand this. So there's always, we're coming on 2 hours. We definitely have to do a sequel to this. There's a lot to discuss.
Sure.
Because everything has to have a sequel nowadays, right?
Okay, right. That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, this was, what was I getting at? What was I talking about?
Oh, you were talking about the bum killing himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I thought the phaser was on overload, but
yeah, that's what I thought too.
Because the sound.
There's always what's the magic of watching the original series and watching the other. I mean, I'll give,
Yeah.
I'll even give love to Voyager and Enterprise. There's always something new to take away from rewatches of these classic shows, but the original series, especially, you just watch it, turn your brain off, enjoy the story for what it is. And I'm very, very forgiving of some of the, the flaws of the original series. Everyone knows the original series is not perfect. There were some, there were some stinkers, like, and the children shall lead. Anything with kids was pretty much a stinker.
Well, in the sequel, let's talk about that, because I have thoughts about "And the Children Shall Lead." I think it has potential. Mary,
bonk, bonk
I like
that.
Mary. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but yeah,
bonk on the head.
To be continued on those, but for sure there are parts of the original series that are not perfect and are dated and are cringy. You can't argue with that. But no, I mean, it's amazing how, I mean, I suppose if you dig into anything, you can go on endlessly, but it just really feels like with this particular show, it's something special, and there's just, always new layers to unpeel. So
yes.
No, this has been great. And anytime you want to do it again, let me know. I'm happy to. I mean, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to talk about it, for 2 hours, but I feel like we've just scratched the surface here. So yeah, let's do it again.
That's what this is. I mean, this is kind of what I do. I'm generally very cheerful. I love doing these. These are a lot of fun. I love to have conversations about stuff that with like-minded people and all that. So I really appreciate you being on. I love the 1 hour and 50 minutes that on has not felt like that at all. This felt like a very quick conversation, but there's so much we didn't, like you said, we didn't even scratch the surface here. So of the original series. So
we reach.
So I gotta ask, what is your favorite, what did you say your favorite episode was? I don't know if you said it earlier in the stream.
I didn't. I mean, again, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I've tended to like the episodes that feature Spock dealing with something over the top. I used to like The Naked Time was my favorite for a long time. I think for many years I've said This Side of Paradise is my favorite because I love that story for Spock. It's very heartbreaking, but it's also a great Kirk episode. That moment when he's alone on the bridge and realizing and realizing, okay, he loves his ship, but really he needs the people. I mean, he can't do this alone.
No.
And I just think very well written and very movingly directed. And I like, and again, it's that theme about not meant for paradise. We have to struggle and scratch, and without the challenge, life is not worth it. So whether you agree with that or not, I think the thematic content is great. So
I agree.
I would probably pick that one.
Okay. That's actually a very, very unique pick. So for me, it's a very tough one as well. I mean, I feel every time I get chills watching Arena. I don't know if I always change my mind on my episodes I love, because I watch them like, okay, that's my favorite episode. But I think Arena really brought in just the humanity of especially of Kirk and of the show in general. Despite the fact that the Gorn murdered a bunch of people. Murdered a bunch of people on Cestus 3. Still was willing to spare the Gorn's life because, maybe there was a misunderstanding. Why did they invade? Why did they attack that planet? So the thing is they tried to trick them into coming down so they could destroy the ship. So there was a little bit more wickedness on the Gorn's part than I think the episode probably should have admitted, but because they only said, you attacked the invaders because you thought they were invading your space. Well, you lured the ship
with
to
the
the
fake
base
distress call, with
the fake distress call. So you guys aren't quite in the right, but hey, no episode's perfect.
But it's complicated, right? It's like life. It's complicated.
It is. So, that was, I really liked how that episode ended. And then of course that kind of carries forward further into Devil in the Dark. That's why I showed the eggs scene. Was it the Chamber of Tomorrow?
Tomorrow,
right. Because that's
Chamber of the Ages.
Chamber of the, because those were her children.
The Vault of Tomorrow. Chamber of the Ages.
Tomorrow. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
And that was another thing where what's funny was that was also a follow-up to the Man Trap, because Man Trap was a slasher. It was a monster episode, a slasher episode.
Right.
People were being offed one by one. The Devil in the Dark starts the same way, but unlike the Man Trap, where they kill, the M113, the salt creature, the vampire, salt vampire, which I think is a terrible name, but M113 creature. Honestly, if I had to change something about that episode, I think they should have found a way to keep it alive, because it was the last of its kind without having to kill it. But then again, this was early into what's eventually became. But the Devil in the Dark solidified what Star Trek was, basically. You took the Horda, the Silicon creature, was doing the same stuff, but it did it for a very different reason. It didn't do it for the salt creature, did it for its own survival. It had to do it no matter what. It wasn't going to stop. The Horda did it for a reason, because the miners were destroying the eggs and there was no way to communicate. And so how do you communicate? Well, you have the alien in the show do it. Mr. Spock was always like, every time Spock was in trouble, his green blood always saved his life, or he always had some ability that allowed him to do something that a normal human could not. So you could still, you could still suspend your disbelief, because he's an alien and all that. So because of the mind meld and all that, he was able to communicate with the Horda, find out why it was doing what it was doing. And then of course they were able to stop it. I felt it was a little easy, because I mean, these men were like, you could not change a mind. Like, you could not change their minds that easily, because that creature murdered their co-workers and friends. They lived together. Like, that's not going to go away. But hey, it's TV. It's a TV show. And but I liked what it was trying to say.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there are, like you mentioned, a few episodes like that where don't judge a book by its cover. The thing that looks like a monster, there's actually, find a connection with it. Or Metamorphosis is another example of that. And I do think that's Star Trek at its best, for sure. I mean, those episodes come up, particularly Devil in the Dark, on a lot of people's top 10 lists. So, and it's setting Star Trek apart from a lot of other science fiction, which is more about just the bug hunt or the monster of the week or that kind of thing. Showing that, well, let's be thoughtful about this, and let's be open that we might have been wrong. Let's be willing to revise our assumptions. I mean, lessons that we still need to work on as humans. So
another thing we need to discuss next time, and I forgot to bring it up, but I was thinking about this, is its connection to Forbidden Planet, which I didn't see until like a few years ago, because of a certain author.
Me neither, actually.
Because of a certain author of a certain fantasy series, which will likely never finish, that's also adapted on HBO. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, right.
Thrones. He said in his blog that his favorite science fiction movie of all time was Forbidden Planet. I have I've seen the movie before, but I've never watched it. I thought it was a horror movie, and I'm watching it. I'm like, holy crap, this is Star Trek. This is the transporter room is in that movie, but it's not a transporter room. It's like a stasis. It's like a stasis field when they go out of light speed or something. They have to go in the stasis field so that they don't die or something. And then the whole ship turns like a red or greenish color or something. But I was like, holy crap, that's a transporter. I'm like, okay, I made a video. I made a Forbidden Planet video, because I don't think anybody else ever talked about that. So I made a video talking about the connections between, especially that and Star Wars. There was a lot of stuff from Star Wars, like the hologram, the little blue holograms that they use to communicate. You see a blue hologram looking thing in the Forbidden Planet.
Okay. And then I need to give that a rewatch. I saw it a few years ago, but
and Spock's brain, Spock's the teacher in Spock's brain. They put the thing on, makes him intelligent. That came from Forbidden Planet too.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess there's nothing new under the sun, but it's definitely a staple of classic sci-fi.
And I think Roddenberry denied it. I think someone asked him, he denied it. I'm like, okay. Everybody knows you did not. Everybody knows you can't deny it. Everybody can see it. Everybody can see that. You can there's a lot. There were episodes that kind of followed. Oh, sorry. There were episodes that kind of followed that Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet makeup or not makeup format, basically.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
go to a
Okay.
planet, there's something wrong,
Yeah.
someone on the planet, there's a problem or there's an issue, and resolve. But we'll talk more about. We'll get more into that. There,
Yeah.
I
I'll
have a
watch it
list of
again. So
episodes. I have
yeah.
I have a list of episodes I think are I call the Forbidden Planet inspired episodes.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
I was surprised, and I was like, how have I not seen this? How we have no one in my family seen it?
Yeah. Well,
I called it an underrated classic because I did not know anybody that watched it. I know when my family watched it, and all these old boomers who were like, I was 10 when that movie came on. This was 1956. I'm getting comments from, I was 10. This is not underrated. You're just a young pup, and I'm like, yes, I am. So thank you for watching my video, but yes, I am. And
yeah.
I had to explain, like I said, I made a fiery statement. I said
Mm,
the one issue I would change was what I said this. I know it's very contentious. I said there was a lack of diversity
mm,
because this takes place in the future. And to me, being in space requires the best people on the planet,
yeah.
and because it's so dangerous. I mean, you think being in the air, being in the sea is dangerous. Well, imagine being in outer space. It's
Yeah.
10 times worse. You have to work every day to survive. You have to make sure those machines are running at the right levels, or you're screwed. That's why the starships need the personnel that they need, and that's
Hmm.
why, like, going out, like in Star Trek 3, they're in sheer desperation. That's why they steal the Enterprise and they go, even though they have no crew. But you
Right.
need a crew, or you could die. Something, a single little thing could go wrong, and everybody could die.
Yeah. You're in an environment that's fundamentally hostile to your form of life. So yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair criticism. And you can say, well, maybe Roddenberry borrowed some ideas from that, especially in terms of sort of the format. But he did bring more diversity to it. I mean, he didn't initially. The Cage is not diverse in that way,
No,
but he did. I mean, there are a lot of attestations that he was one of the driving forces behind just having people in the background, just having people from different parts of the world, different ethnicities, um, you know, as just accepted as just like, of course, that's what's going on, even not necessarily even shining a spotlight on it all the time, but just like, of course, that's what the world would be like in the future. Why wouldn't it be? So, I'd be certainly I'm sure he borrowed a fair amount from. I'll have to watch it again to see that. I think just the idea of a large galactic kind of political entity and going out exploring new worlds and sort of the policeman of the universe in a way. Although the story I think itself is basically the Tempest,
it is.
um, but um, then he added and everybody added something to this pot that became Star Trek, and just it tastes great.
Yeah, and I mean, they even go. I think in a mock time, they go to the Altair. They go to the Altair star system. Like,
They reference it. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think in Forbidden Planet, it's Altair
That's where they're
6.
going. Okay,
Yes.
Altair 6. Okay.
So, but yeah, this was such a
Yeah,
great
thank you very
conversation.
much.
Thank you for doing this. This was fun. We definitely got to do this again.
Yeah.
So is there anything you would like to? I always end, because usually
Promote.
I usually have a YouTube. I usually have other YouTubers on. I give them a chance to promote their stuff, so that that this experience, doing this with me will benefit them, going forward and everything. I like to help other content creators if I can.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a content creator. I'm just some guy on X who uses an obscure Star Trek character as his handle. I mean, I like to. That's the only place you'll find me. I don't have any other presence except on Twitter/X. So
Part 2, we have to find out why you went with Subcommander Tal.
next time.
That's next time on Chillporeal.
Yeah. Oh, I will say one other thing. I do have another account on X. It's called it's a Mr. Leslie account, which is kind of like a little goofy journal of a background character in the original series, kind of like a humorous take on that. That's at Mr. Leslie TOS. People can look at that if you want sort of deep cut, silly Star Trek humor.
So all of your X links are in the description. So definitely,
Okay.
if you are not following Subcommander Tal, definitely follow Subcommander Tal. If you're a fan of the original series, he has some great posts, just some trivia stuff that just, like, every time I see something, if I get a chance, I will definitely comment or maybe playfully put a quote in or respond to it in a funny way. And it's just I love it. And same with what about TOS Area Night? You still doing stuff with that TOS Area Night? I love that too.
That what a great group that is. I haven't personally done as much lately because I work on Sundays and Saturday night. You got to stay up pretty late for it, but I do it when I can, and it's always I remember when I first joined, started doing the live tweeting with them. I'm trying to tweet all these factoids, thinking like, oh well, these guys can't possibly know as much as they all know everything. There's it's a bunch of experts who love the show, but they're very open. They're very they have fun with it. They don't take it too seriously, but it's from a place of love. So, I recommend anyone, if you want a good live tweeting experience, the hashtag TOS Saturday night. That's midnight Eastern on every Saturday.
All right. Well, Subcommander, sir.
Yep.
Thank you for doing this.
Engage cloaking device here.
Engage cloaking device. Everybody. So for me, tomorrow night, me and Salty Traveling Sea was in the chat. We were going to be doing another serial. We're going to be doing a serial horror. That's my streams where we talk about a particular horror movie. In this case, we were talking about John Carpenter's The Fog. And so another thing to bring up next time, Subcommander, is the connection. I actually made some connections when I made a Halloween video. I made some connections with Halloween with Forbidden Planet and with Star Trek, believe it or not. So yeah, John Carpenter was a big fan of Forbidden Planet. That's how I saw Forbidden Planet for the first time, was in the movie Halloween, the original 1978 Halloween. So
okay.
But yeah, so we're gonna be covering The Fog, John Carpenter's The Fog on Saturday. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Go some supernatural horror. I have to watch it tomorrow before seeing it, or before doing the stream, obviously. And Sunday, if I get far enough, I'm going to do my Wheel of Time book club, and for the sixth book. So definitely keep a lookout for that. So yeah, this could be a busy weekend for me. I think I scheduled more streams than ever. So like yesterday felt like a day because I did on Wednesday I did Silence of the Lambs. That's why Silence of the Lambs is fresh in my head.
I saw a little bit of that. Yeah, I love that movie.
Yes, Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. All those scenes he was in with Jodie Foster. Like I was a kid. I think I was in high school, 8th grade, 9th grade when I saw that rented on VHS. That first scene just like hooked me into the movie. Like that Anthony Hopkins, he's like, "Let me see your credentials, please." And she's like, "Okay."
Closer.
And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, this is getting terrifying and everything." And yes, such a great movie, such great characters. Yeah. Like it was it's a lot of fun. So everybody definitely check out that serial horror if you haven't. It's a lot of fun doing with my friend Pips and everything. So, but yeah, so that's it for me. So everybody follow Subcommander Tal, and we got a member thing from DJ Ryan G. He's another big Star Trek fan, science fiction fan. Can we get Subcommander to Paul for next week? That's gonna be that's I'll have to find that one out. Speaking of which, I learned this today. I didn't realize it, but the actor that played Subcommander Tal was also in Enterprise. He played.
Yes, he was.
I had no idea. I had no idea that was him.
I've never seen the episode, but I've seen screenshots from it. Jack Donner was his name.
Season 4 of Enterprise. The showrunner Manny Coto tried really hard to link that with the original series, and I really enjoyed that season for that reason. It's my favorite season of Enterprise, the 4th season, the season that they canceled. So when it got good is when they canceled it. So well, but that's life, and
that's life.
And United Paramount Network sucks because of that. So so all right, everybody. Follow Subcommander Tal, and everybody subscribe and hit the like and share video. If you know other Star Trek fans, point them here. This was a great conversation, original series, exclusive. And yes, part 2 will be sometime in the future. Until everybody, take care, live long and stay Chillporeal.